All right, before we get into this, I want you to take a deep breath. Maybe sit down if you aren't already, because what we are about to go through today is not just a list of bad things that happened to people in history. This is a countdown of the most horrifying, most depraved, most stomach-turning punishments that human beings have ever inflicted on one another.
Number 5. The Brazen Bull. We are going to start with something that proves one thing above all else. Ancient Greeks were absolutely not messing around when it came to punishment. The Brazen Bull, also known as the Bronze Bull or the Sicilian Bull, was invented around 570 BC by a craftsman named Pyrrholos of Athens. So, what exactly was the Brazen Bull? Picture a life-size hollow statue of a bull cast entirely out of bronze. On the side of the bull there was a small door, just large enough for a human being to be forced inside. Once the prisoner was locked in, a fire was lit underneath the statue, and the bronze would slowly begin to heat up from the outside in. Now, bronze conducts heat extraordinarily well, which means within minutes the inside of that bull became an oven, and the prisoner would begin to cook alive. But here is where Pyrrholos really showed his work, because he had actually engineered a pipe system inside the bull's nostrils, so that as the prisoner screamed and wailed in agony from being slowly roasted alive, the sound would travel through the pipes and exit through the bull's nose, making it sound like the bull itself was bellowing and snorting. Phalaris was apparently so impressed by this little feature that he immediately tested it on Pyrrholos himself. The man invented his own torture device and became the first person to die in it. There is a lesson in there somewhere. Eventually, after the prisoner had been cooked to death, the bull would be opened up and the bones would be made into bracelets and sold at local markets. So not only did you get publicly executed inside a giant metal cow, but your remains ended up as someone's jewelry. Truly something else.
Number 4. Bamboo torture. For anyone who does not know, bamboo is one of the fastest growing plants on the entire planet. Under the right conditions, certain species of bamboo can grow up to 91 centimeters in a single day. If you take a young bamboo shoot and sharpen its tip to a fine point, it is not just fast, it is strong enough to puncture human flesh and push its way right through a body from the inside. The method of punishment involved staking a prisoner flat on their back directly over a bed of freshly cut bamboo shoots. Their wrists, ankles, and neck would be secured to the ground so that they physically could not move so much as an inch in any direction. And then they would just leave them there. That is it. No fire, no implements, nothing dramatic. Just time. Because within the first few hours, the bamboo would begin to push against the prisoner's skin, and by the end of the first day, it would begin to pierce through. The bamboo does not stop, it does not care. It just grows, steadily, relentlessly, through everything in its path. Historians and military researchers have confirmed this was actually used as a method of execution and torture across parts of Asia, including during wartime in the 20th century. Survivors who endured shorter exposures described a pressure so unbearable that many would beg to die before the first night was over. It is not loud, it is not flashy. It is just nature doing what it does. And that somehow makes it the most quietly horrifying thing on this entire list.
Number 3. The Catherine Wheel. The Catherine Wheel. Named after Saint Catherine of Alexandria, a Christian martyr who was allegedly sentenced to die on a spiked breaking wheel in the 4th century. The Romans were not particularly impressed and simply beheaded her instead. But the wheel itself? The wheel lived on for centuries. Here is how it worked. The condemned would be tied spread eagle to a large cartwheel, arms and legs lashed to the spokes, body completely exposed. The executioner would then take a heavy iron-shod wheel or a large hammer and systematically work their way through the prisoner's body, starting at the extremities, the shins, the forearms, shattering each bone one by one with measured, deliberate blows. The process was intentionally slow. The executioner was trained to work carefully so as not to strike a killing blow too early. Death was to come last, not first. Now, in some cases, for prisoners who had shown particular cruelty in their crime, the judge could order what was called the wheel from the bottom. This meant beginning at the feet and working upward, which guaranteed the maximum amount of consciousness and suffering before the vital organs were finally struck. But in some rare cases, judges granted mercy by ordering the first blow to strike the chest or the head, a quick death before the breaking began in earnest. This was considered an act of compassion. Let that sink in. After death, the body was often left on the wheel and raised on a tall pole for the public to see.
Number 2. The Blood Eagle. The Blood Eagle is a form of execution that comes from Old Norse sources and Viking Age literature, and it is, without exaggeration, one of the most extreme methods of killing that has ever been documented in human history. So what was it? The condemned, usually a high-ranking enemy, a king, a jarl, someone whose death was meant to send a message across an entire nation, would be placed face down and held completely still. The executioner would then take a blade and make 2 long cuts along either side of the spine. The skin and muscle of the back would then be peeled away and folded outward like a pair of doors. Then the ribs. Starting from the spine, each rib would be cut away from the vertebrae and snapped outward, one by one, until they fanned out away from the body, resembling, as the sagas describe it, the wings of an eagle. The lungs would then be pulled out through the open cavity and draped over the exposed rib wings. Some accounts mention salt being poured into the wound to prolong consciousness. One of the most cited historical references involves Halfdan, a Norse king killed by Ivar the Boneless as revenge for the murder of his father Ragnar Lothbrok. Now, whether this is entirely historical or partly mythologized, the fact remains that this image, a man torn apart and displayed like a bird, was powerful enough to be recorded, retold, and feared for centuries. Number 1. Lingchi. Death by 1,000 cuts.
Lingchi, translated from Chinese as slow slicing, creeping death, or most commonly, death by 1,000 cuts, was an official method of execution used in China from roughly the 900s all the way through to 1905. The process began with the prisoner being tied to a post or frame in a public space. A trained executioner, and this was a skilled profession, not something handed to just anyone, would then begin making small, precise cuts across the body. The cuts were methodical, deliberate. The goal was not to cause maximum immediate pain, but to remove as much flesh as possible in as many separate cuts as possible while keeping the condemned person alive for as long as possible. In some documented cases, the executioner was expected to make hundreds of cuts. In the most severe sentences, reserved for those who had committed the absolute worst crimes, the number could reach into the thousands, carried out over multiple sessions across multiple days. The crowd was always watching. The humiliation was as intentional as the pain. What puts Lingchi at number 1 is not just the physical reality of it, it is the philosophy behind it. Every other punishment on this list, no matter how brutal, was designed to end a life. So there you have it, the top 5 worst punishments in human history. And look, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, I genuinely respect you. This was not an easy watch. But I think it is important to look at these things honestly, because history does not get kinder by being ignored. It only gets repeated. If you want more deep dives like this, drop a comment below and let me know what topic you want next. And until then, stay safe, be kind to people, and for the love of everything good, do not invent torture devices and pitch them to tyrants.